question
Supreme Court
is,
justice,
the
radical
question,
left.
will you shut up, man?
Listen,
It's been a bitter battle for the White House between President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden, and it could get uglier.
Keep yapping, man.
Trump has accused his rival of trying to rig the election and says he'll take his case to the Supreme Court.
This is a major fraud in our nation. We want the law to be used in a proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list, okay?
Many investors had been counting on a clear victory for Biden, followed by the announcement of a stimulus package to revive the economy. Now they're gearing up for more political uncertainty and no immediate cash handouts.
Biggest wrinkle of all is President Trump's assertion that he's going to go to the Supreme Court. I think that's very dangerous, particularly if he pursues that particular option. I think it's going to be extremely uncertain, and unless we get a clear outcome out of the Electoral College.
The government's already poured $3.3 trillion into the economy since the coronavirus outbreak hit in March. The money was spent on cash handouts for all citizens, emergency loans for companies struggling due to lockdowns, and healthcare services. The US Federal Reserve also pitched in to ease the economic impact of the pandemic. It's lowered interest rates that banks charge each other by 1.5 percentage points since March to a range of 0 to 0.25%. It's also stepped up buying the government's debt. The Fed's portfolio of US Treasuries rose 56% to $6.1 trillion between March and June. And it's offering short-term loans to 24 of the country's largest financial institutions so they don't face a cash crunch. The Fed is meeting again on Thursday, but its arsenal is limited, and it's calling on the government to do more to revive the economy. Analysts say whoever becomes the president may not be able to do that immediately without a clear majority in the Senate.
And if you think about, say, 2008 as the closest analog, we had a change in control in the White House and Congress in 2008, and we didn't get a stimulus package until February of 2009, and the market didn't bottom until March of 2009. So that's really the most worrisome case in some perspectives as to what may happen for the next, say, 90 to 120 days.
As the pandemic bears down on businesses, millions of Americans are counting on government aid to survive. But they could be waiting for some time if the political fight drags on. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Well, for more on this knife-edge race, Joe Watkins joins us from Philadelphia. He's a former White House aide under the President George H.W. Bush's administration, and is also the host of State of Independence. And Simon Rosenberg joins us from Washington, D.C. He's the president of the New Democrat Network and a former senior consultant for the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Welcome to you both, gentlemen. Simon, if I could start with you. We now know it's an incredibly tight race. Most of the national opinion polls suggested that it would be a landslide in favour of Joe Biden. We know that hasn't happened. How did it all go wrong, and how disappointed are you that once again the pollsters have got it wrong?
I don't think there's any disappointment on the Democratic side. Our number one mission was to defeat Donald Trump, and I think we're well on the way to do that. I think we'll have a clear result perhaps as early as this evening, or certainly early tomorrow morning. We have retained control of the House, and the Senate is still up for grabs. So could it have gone a little bit better? Of course. But I think in terms of us achieving the core objective of this election, I think we're well on the way to getting that done.
So what do you think is behind this discrepancy with national opinion polls and the outcome? Is it the fact that perhaps some people are too afraid to admit to pollsters that perhaps they support Donald Trump and tell them they're going to support Democrats? Is that what's happened here?
You know, I think there's going to be two things. First of all, I think in many states the polls weren't really that far off. I mean, I think in places like North Carolina and Georgia and Arizona, we knew those states were all going to be very close, 1 or 2 points. That's where they were coming out. I think where there's been a bit of a bigger miss has been up in the industrial Midwest, where there was a miss last time. And in the national polling, I think that Joe Biden could end up winning by 6 points when all the votes are cast. I think it could be 52-46 based on when New York and California. So I don't know that the national polls, like last time, were really that far off. I think where it's clear that in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, that things we thought were going to be better. But right now, we think we're on track to win all three, maybe not by the margin that we wanted, but I think we feel good about where we are right now.
Joe, if I could turn to you now. We know hours after the election, President Donald Trump called for the legitimate counting of votes to stop and is threatening to challenge results in the Supreme Court. Do you think he'll actually go through with this, and on what grounds?
Well, I think for the most part, the president is trying to keep his base engaged and let Americans know that this is a much closer race than anybody imagined. The pollsters didn't get it right because they miscalculated the enthusiasm of the Trump base. Those are predominantly white, non-college educated voters who support the president. These are Democrats and Republicans, blue-collar workers, primarily in a host of states in the Midwest, in the South, and in different parts of the country. They came out in big numbers for Donald Trump. His message was strong enough to win the support of the Hispanic vote in Florida. So he won Florida, a state that he wasn't supposed to win, at least not so handily. And he also improved his number with African American voters. I had said repeatedly during the campaign that if he was able to maybe get an additional 3 or 4 or 5 percentage points more than he got in 2016, that would be significant. And he did that. He got about 12% of the black vote as compared with Biden's 87% of the black vote, which made this a lot closer race than it otherwise would have been. But for the most part, everybody's going to be watching what happens in the key battleground states today as they continue to count votes. I know here in Pennsylvania, everybody's watching to see how the vote counting is going, and it's probably going to take till Friday before we know a final vote tally. But certainly, we should know sooner than that in Michigan and Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Georgia.
Well,
so we should know.
Yes, that's right. Now, it could take days for the counting to finalize in several states, but Donald Trump seems to suggest that counting of valid votes before the end of closing day should be stopped. Do you agree?
Well, it's not a matter of whether or not I agree. It's just a matter of what the courts say and what the law says. I know that the states control the ballot boxes and the voting process. So I know that governors and secretaries of state in the various states will continue counting votes, and that'll happen in an unimpeded way. So you can expect to hear final vote tallies in the next day or 2 days or 3 days from the various states as it relates to the votes that they've gotten in their states. And then the burden is on the president if he wishes to file any kind of legal action to do so. But the counting of the votes will go on as expected.
Simon, is Joe Biden ready for a Supreme Court challenge? And is there any circumstance in which the Biden campaign might file a Supreme Court action of their own?
I don't think there's really any I think the reason why the president hasn't filed any kind of legal challenge is because there is no basis for it. I mean, 20 states allow ballots to come in after Election Day. Every state allows legally ballots to be counted after Election Day, allow the count to go on. You can't keep voting, but the count can go on. And the federal government, our federal law, allows states up to 5 weeks to determine the winner of their state. So there really isn't any legal justification for challenging, and particularly there's no precedent in the United States, or frankly in any democracy that I'm aware of, where there's a legal way of overturning legally cast votes that have already been counted. If that's something that could happen, you don't really have a democracy any longer, right? If one political party, through the control of the courts, could invalidate millions of ballots that have been legally cast. So I think the reason why, I think this is huffing and puffing, and Joe described it as keeping his base engaged. But I don't actually think they're going to pursue it. And so I believe, and what Democrats believe, is that we're on track to win this election, and that Joe Biden is on track to be the next American president.
Let's talk about one thing that's at stake here, and this is the much-needed fiscal stimulus for the American economy. We know that the two sides, Republicans and Democrats, are still divided over the size of what this deal could mean. But as we wait for an outcome, millions of Americans who are out of work are also waiting for some much-needed relief. Joe, in your opinion, how badly do Americans need this stimulus, and what needs to be done in order to push this through when this result comes through?
Clearly there are lots of Americans in need right now, given the impact of the COVID-19 crisis, and the impact has been felt worldwide, but certainly here in the United States, it's been pretty severe, and so it's very much needed. The Republicans will maintain control of the Senate. Democrats will broaden their control of the House once all the votes are counted, so they may have as many as 5 more Democratic seats in the House than they did before. And the burden will be on the elected officials, on senators and members of Congress to come to agreement on a relief package that works for Americans that the president can sign. So Donald Trump, whether he wins or loses, is still the president of the United States until January 20th. So they've got the Republicans and Democrats in the House, as it currently stands, will have to make that decision and then put together a package that the president can sign.
Yes, and Simon, the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has been criticized for really not coming to the table in terms of the Republican demands for perhaps a slightly less generous stimulus package. So as Joe pointed out, Donald Trump, regardless of the outcome, will still be president until January. Do you think the Democrats should really get over their differences and agree on something so that millions of Americans can finally receive some more aid?
So the burden of coming to an agreement is entirely on us? Is that what you're saying? That I don't think that's how negotiations work, right? So you're asking us just to capitulate and give in to Republican demands. I think I think it's been clear that that's not what we're going to do. I think we have a profound difference of opinion about how this should proceed. Mitch McConnell's wanted no stimulus at all, and we've been very open to have talks. Mitch McConnell didn't even participate in the negotiations prior to the election. So the Republicans have to come to the table. We've passed a stimulus through the House. The Senate hasn't passed anything. And so, we've laid out a marker. Nancy Pelosi is a reasonable person. She's willing to get to a different place. But the negotiation wasn't between a Democratic stimulus and a Republican stimulus. It was a negotiation between a Democratic stimulus and no Republican stimulus. There is no Republican stimulus. And so we need the Senate and Mitch McConnell to step up here and take some responsibility for the economic and future of the country. And so I hope that if he feels that he had a good election outcome, that he's going to be more free to do the responsible thing here and come to the table with the president and the Democrats to try to get something done.
In the meantime, the world will watch and wait to see how what comes of this vote counting. Simon Rosenberg in DC and Joe Watkins in Philadelphia. Thank you again for joining us.